In here. Our discussion begins here with the human nature and human history. The earliest human history and the question of what does it mean to be a human being. Our terms for the day are archaeology, paleontology, the Paleolithic, Neolithic eras. We'll look at the river valley civilizations of Egypt with the Nile, Mesopotamia, the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, India and the Ganges, Indus rivers, and China, the Yellow or Yangtze River. Some of these early civilizations in Mesopotamia, particularly the Sumerians and the Amorites, Code of Hammurabi, and of course their king Hammurabi himself. Now, the basic question here is, what is human nature? Who are we? What do we do? Why is it important to study human nature? Understand ourselves. Because sometimes the most important, we don't recognize what we're most familiar with. So we have to step back and take a look at something. Take a look at our surroundings. So I had a friend of mine once said, if fish were scientists, the last thing they discover is water. Because it's something so obvious and so basic to them. And they're surrounded with it, something they just wouldn't think about. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, it was only in the 1700s we actually knew what oxygen was. But human beings are who we are. And we're generally the same anywhere in the world. We may dress differently, we may think differently, live differently, believe differently, talk differently, even different regional accents. But human beings, no matter the time, place, or circumstances, or level of technology, we are generally all the same. Same hopes and fears, strengths and weaknesses. We ask ourselves the same questions about the world. Nature of life and death. Is there a God? If so, what's the nature of this God or gods? Whatever cosmic force binds us all together. So ask questions about love, family, the future. Anywhere in the world, any time in the world, centuries ago or the present or even centuries in the future, people are doing the same things. And as human beings, we run across the same level of problems every so often. And we study history because human beings, given the same set of circumstances, the same strengths and weaknesses, same priorities, given the same problems, will usually make the same decisions. Right or wrong. Sometimes people make the right decision, some people make the wrong decisions. But by studying this, we understand ourselves. We understand how to approach problems. We understand how to overcome adversities. We understand how to get through this thing called life. Now, what are the advantages human beings have over other animals? Knowledge, reason, power of the mind. What else? What's that? Thumbs? What's it? Yeah, think. Thinking, the ability to think, to reason. Because really, look at us. As human beings, we're not very fast. We walk maybe an average of about 5 miles an hour. If that's walking quickly, at a sprint, we might be able to get up to 20 miles an hour. But there are a lot of nasty little creatures in the savannas and the jungles who are a lot faster than we are. And little woodland creatures that our ancestors hunted for food and still do today, they're a lot faster than we are too. We're not too quick. Strength. Stronger than some creatures, but a lot of creatures a lot stronger than we are. So a gorilla could tear our arms out of our sockets. But we have just enough. We walk upright. That gives us some advantages, though. Obvious disadvantage, our major organs are exposed. Except not something you have to think about walking down the streets of El Dorado, Arkansas in 2015, but the wilds of nature 100,000 or 1,000,000 years ago, that's a serious problem you're dealing with. Especially when humanity is not quite the top of the food chain yet. There actually have been the fossilized remains of early humans found where they find giant teeth marks and skulls of some of these people. Found out that person was somebody's lunch, some saber-toothed tiger or something like that. Yep. One got hunted. You're going to need a bigger boat. Say we can't fly, can't jump very high. We might be able to climb trees, but not very quickly. Yeah. We can swim a little bit, but we only hold our breath underwater for about a minute at most. Yeah. Exactly. So the advantages of human beings is, among other things mentioned, the opposable thumb. Thumb turned slightly to its side, making it easier to grip things, to make a fist, to manipulate small objects. We can work with very fine tools and small objects because that thumb is turned ever so slightly. So a lot of other creatures have thumbs, but not the opposable thumb.
So they can't move their thumb?
They can move it, but it's like an ordinary finger. So all they can do is just kind of, just a lot hard. They don't have quite the dexterity of their hands that we do. Which means we can make things, but of course you have to know what to make. That's where the human mind comes in. There are plenty of creatures that are very intelligent in the world. Like I say, dogs that think their people are smart. But whales are intelligent. But monkeys are intelligent. Primates are very intelligent. Yeah. Like I say, some debate on who's the smartest, but like I say, lowland gorillas, they can use language. Except, there's and use tools. Chimpanzees use tools. Like I say, we don't think about it, but not very often, but they do. Yeah, so beware the genetic engineering, beware the chimpanzee apocalypse. Get your paws off me, you damn dirty apes. Like I say, there's that one gorilla that's been kept in a zoo for like 35, 40 years in Cocoa. That was like 100 words of American Sign Language. Very expressive. So the gorilla can cuss you out, too. But found indications that, yes, other gorillas, they can communicate as well. They don't necessarily have sign language, but they can communicate with each other. They could even probably make gestures of different types. They can understand each other. It is in gorilla societies that complex communication simply are just not a priority. So they don't have not a lot to say. Could they think about these things? Could they communicate if they wanted to? But they really don't need to. But human beings, we are fairly intelligent. I have to say far more properly, we have the ability to be more intelligent. We don't necessarily use it. But we can build tools, we can build buildings, we can we can put men on the moon, we can launch satellites to the far reaches of the solar system. We can build small computers that can access the internet. We can cure almost any disease, or at least find a treatment for it. But not only knowledge, but imagination. You give us a problem, we can come up with 100 different answers within just a couple of minutes. All sorts of scenarios for things we have never even seen or imagined. Just by giving the information and from the knowledge we have already. And of course, given that, human beings have another advantage. So our bodies are a lot hardier than a lot of others. We have a greater range of habitation. We don't have to live in just a certain small area of the world with certain perfect weather conditions. Human beings live in anywhere on the globe. The hottest equatorial regions, the desert regions, on the oceans, on the lakes, and the mountains, and the Arctic. It's a hot or cold, high elevation, low elevation, high humidity, low humidity, close to water, away from water. We're there. We can live there. Diet. We don't have to have just a specific kind of diet. Human beings can eat anything. Just about. Which means, we can eat really things with absolutely no nutritional value at all. But we have entire industries devoted to that. But because that we can go for several days without eating if we had to. We don't want to. It's extraordinarily uncomfortable. But if we absolutely had to, we could go a couple days without eating. If we go a day or two without water, it would not be good on us, but we could do it. We could go a couple days without sleep. Not recommended, but we could do it. We need regular sleep. Actually, the record for the longest period without sleep during the Punic Wars, the Carthaginians captured a Roman captain. They tortured him by keeping him awake for 2 weeks straight. Eventually collapsed and died.
From
lack of sleep. It'll either kill you or in the show Once a Thousand Ways to Die.
Keep him awake for 2 weeks.
Just kept jostling him, waking him up, slapping him around. In England, there's a museum dedicated to devices of torture. All sorts of ways people were tortured throughout the ages, the Middle Ages in England.
They were pretty creative.
It'd be very creative. Which brings us to another important note about human nature is we are capable of unspeakable acts of savagery. We can commit acts that would give people nightmares, make grown men cry. But we're capable of absolutely the opposite end of as well. Very touching acts of selflessness and generosity. I think of Mother Teresa and feeding the homeless of Calcutta, India, and trying to find homes for the orphans, dedicating her life just to that, just to other people. That's just one example. I can think of hundreds of others. So many so that we expect the good in people and are always disappointed when the bad comes out. Brings us to another human quality. Empathy. Sentiment. Empathy is the ability to understand and value the feelings of others. Sentiment. The ability to love. May sound kind of hokey, but that actually has been a tremendous value for us. The ability to understand and value the emotions of others. Actually, as human beings, we can live on our own. We can live in groups. Generally, we're more comfortable with groups. Sometimes at arm's distance from others, but we like groups. We're social creatures. But that gives us an advantage. We can use the collective strengths of different people for different projects. Some people are better at some things than others, and that can be used to different advantages. Some people are stronger. Some people are better at making tools. Some people are better at making plans. Some people are better at finding places to hide. Some people are better at better at building homes. Some people are better at making things. Some people are better warriors. Some people are better priests. But as a group, we use the strengths to shore up the weaknesses of each of us as individuals. We use those strengths to make ourselves better as a group. It's a more formal sociological term. It's called division of labor. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Example: some people are better as surgeons because they're better with their hands and they're not bothered by looking at somebody's insides. Some people are better teachers. Some people are better nurses. Some people are better accountants because they're just better at numbers than other people. People with all sorts of different things they're better at than others that they use for the advantage of the society. But the fact we do value people and do value each other is a strength. We take care of each other when we're sick. We show concern for others. And that is a source of great strength, the ability to care for others, because we understand that while we may be doing fine today, we may not be doing quite so fine later, and somebody may need to help us. Helping others, we help ourselves. But also back to adaptability. One thing human beings have done, though, has given us a great advantage is we don't necessarily adapt to the environment. We make the environment adapt to us. Yeah. Like I say, it's too cold, we build a fire. It's too hot, we invent air conditioning. Live out in the desert, we build a pipeline 100 miles to connect to the nearest river. Our favorite supply of food is gone, we eat something else. Like I say, it's raining outside, we build a shelter. Except, like they show The Big Bang Theory, and that one character on there, Sheldon Cooper, once said, because he didn't like outdoor activity, said, if outside is so great, how come we spent so many centuries trying to perfect inside? A good point. But adapting the environment to suit us. We're here in a nice, comfortable, air-conditioned room. Except protect us from the heat of the day. Of course, to provide the light we need because of the way this building is designed, we emitted electric light. The illumination we need to make our eyes most comfortable. Could we read in the shadows if it was lights were out? We could. It wouldn't be necessarily be. It's easier with the lights on, but we could do it. Yeah, 95 degree day outside. Can we handle it? Yeah, no problem. Just need to be careful we don't overwork, stress ourselves out. We could do it, but we're better off in a nice air-conditioned room. It's about 72 degrees. Like I said, we need to bring our next meal with us. No. It's waiting for us at home in the refrigerator or at a restaurant across the street or something. The environment we adapted to us. Like I said, we don't want to wade through 2 or 3 foot high grass. We pave the roads. Of course, when studying history, though, talk about a lot of time periods there were no written records. Like today, anything and everything is recorded. Everything's written down. But there are people who had to do that first. There are people before them who didn't do it. So that's where these sciences come in. Help us fill in the gap. Archaeology, for example. Most useful studying. It's the scientific study of past cultures and civilizations. Basically sift through the ruins of past societies just to see how they worked, how they lived, how they died, what they thought. Even further back than that, paleontology. The scientific study of fossils. Remains buried by dirt, pressure turns them into fossils over many millennia. We study what's there to find out. We put the pieces together. Giant jigsaw puzzle, piecing together a little bit at a time. Basically, it's a pursuit of fact. You're entitled to your own opinion, certainly, but you're not entitled to your own facts. In fact, the Earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago. All the evidence, our instruments and understandings and observations of the known universe say 4.5 billion years. More or less, give or take a million years. Just a million. Man's earliest ancestors. A group called the Australopithecines. Emerged about 3 to 4 million years ago. Central Africa. Areas of Kenya and thereabouts. Kenya is often called the cradle of humanity. Of course, these Australopithecines, very different from us, but a lot of striking similarities in skeletal structure and so forth, but they're only about maybe 3 or 4 feet tall. Like I say, not very quick, not very intelligent, very short lifespan, maybe 30 or 40 years. But our ancestors, the Australopithecines, adapted, changed, and moved on over many, many generations. We're talking about here about millions of years. So not 4 days ago, 4 million years ago. Like I said, hundreds of thousands of generations. Except successes and failures, tragedies.
Where it says BD, what does that mean?
Before present. Yeah. It's an archaeological short. In fact, we'll explain that more in just a minute. But excellent question. Like I said, creatures, no reason why they should have survived. Their descendants come to the top of the food chain, but they did. Was it because of this combination of advantages? Combination being the right place, right time, just dumb luck situation, or as one author pointed out, maybe it's because we were the craziest ones in the jungle. That we were the ones nobody wanted to mess with. But moving ahead a little bit. The next group, the hominids, are about 1.5 million years ago. Hominids, the genus, our species, Homo sapiens. First ones of that group emerging that time. In this case, the Latin homo meaning man. Sapient man. Ones of this time period called Homo erectus, that is the erect standing man, is basically not as hunched over as some of the lower primates, but standing more like what a modern human would stand like. About 1.5 million years ago. And it's these guys here, our earliest ancestors, as they started using tools 1.5 million years ago. So these are our ancestors. So we can tell this from skeletal structure, fossil remains, DNA. Now, with the use of stone tools, you enter a period called the Paleolithic era. Paleolithic. From the Latin means basically Old Stone Age. I'm not talking about the Flintstones here. They weren't building nice ranch-style rock houses in a nice suburb with feet-powered cars. No, it didn't exist. Just a silly TV show. This is the first time people started using tools. Very crude tools, made just a rock with an end chipped off of it, a sharpened end, where you can basically start hacking into the animals you're eating, make it easier to get through the hides to get to the meat. Like I say, it was a hand-to-mouth existence. You're literally eating off the hoof. Like I say, so disease rates are high, injury rates are high. People are there's no medical care yet. Yeah. And so you're really not living very long. You're not eating very healthy. So you're not really as tall or as large as what you could be in the modern world. Actually, at 40 years old, I've been considered a senior citizen over the hill by their standards. But in our society, 21st century, in the prime of my life, 100 years old is not unusual anymore. But of course, the question, how can they tell that these rocks are being used as tools? It's just a rock. A little bit by the shape, but A little bit more, but of course, you can find the rocks that chips off of them all the time, not touched by human hands.
Studying the rock and seeing scrapes and stuff.
Yeah, scrapes and sometimes blood stains on them. And sometimes just the obvious. They dug up a body, fossilized remains, and he's clutching a rock that has a big chip off of it. They know, just while looking at the rock, they know they used it as a tool.
Yeah, I think they found like a whole bunch of these rocks that are all the same shape, size, pretty much in like caves.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And sometimes these rocks are hundreds of miles from where they should be appearing naturally. Because that rock should not be there, but you can tell somebody picked it up, chipped an end off it, used a tool, and carried about 400 or 500 miles. Except one thing you can also say about human beings is we're very determined critters. Except many of us, we get our minds focused on something. There's no changing our minds, no turning us back. So you got stone tools. You've got use of fire about 750,000 years ago. Again, discovered in a cave. Got a mile inside of a cave. Which meant people didn't have to freeze in the winter. They could cook their food, which was a lot tastier. A lot healthier, too. That's an important advancement. Also, roughly 100,000 years ago, burial of the dead. The site called Shanidar Cave in northeastern Iraq, where they found the earliest known burial sites. They said a lot about human nature right there was human beings were developing a greater degree of empathy. We were starting to recognize that we were mortal, that we are going to die, and showing the level of care and compassion that we had for others. It takes a lot of work to bury somebody. It showed a level of concern that somebody dropped and died on the spot. They just didn't want to just have them just watch them sit there and rot or have some animal carry them away. I want to give a fitting goodbye. Yeah, basic respect. Perhaps there are questions about an afterlife. Is there something after this life? Who's to say? All sorts of civilizations have stories of people who have come back from the dead and reported something about an afterlife. But were they seeing really real or not? Who knows? But they're showing care and compassion. They're asking questions about mortality and life. And from an archaeological standpoint, we can find out a lot about people from these burial sites. People are often buried with objects. Archaeologists call it grave goods, with tools or weapons or some kind of artifact from a previous life. They found children buried with toys. Let's find these early societies that they would care for people who were gravely ill. A lot of indications from these burial sites that there are people who were paralyzed or gravely ill that would not have been able to care for themselves, but they took care of them because of a sense of love and loyalty. A sense of connection that we're just not going to leave our own behind. That everybody counts. Now, of course, you have all these different dating systems here, but thrown out here. BP, like I said before, it's archaeological shorthand for before present, so you don't have to add and subtract 2000 every time you're looking at an old date. And of course, you have the classic system AD and BC. And here in the West using the Christian the Gregorian calendar. In the 6th century, a monk decided the most important event in human history is the birth of Christ, and so he reorganized the calendar for everything being basically before the birth and since the birth. So BC means before Christ. AD is Latin for Anno Domini. It's in the year of our Lord. It doesn't mean after death. It basically means since birth, the year of. And here's the problem. The monks' calculations may have been just a little bit off. Because we don't know exactly when Christ was born. Most theologians say probably between 4 and 6 BC. Probably not on December 25th, probably in springtime, but it does. But to solve that problem, though, some scholars go to BC, CE, and BC, which means Common Era or before Common Era, which is basically the same thing. Some books will see that written like that. Then we'll stick with the classics for our standards. But the other civilizations around the world have all sorts of different calendars. Some go by a lunar calendar. We have a solar calendar. Some will have their calendars beginning with the basic important events in their civilization. For example, the Jewish calendar goes back to what they feel is the beginning of time, 7,000 years ago. Others will have, for example, the Muslim calendar dates from the arrival of Muhammad in Mecca, 1,400 years ago. But most of the world, because of the dominance of Europe in the 19th and 20th centuries, uses some variation on the Gregorian calendar. Even China, that is officially atheist and anti-Western, they use the Gregorian calendar. And even the Middle East, where use the Muslim calendar for cultural events, they'll use the Gregorian calendar for business purposes. We'll talk a little bit more about archaeology next time and these early river valley civilizations. Keep reading chapter 1 in your books, and if there is nothing else,